Hi, I'm Romy, and 3 days ago my mother died. And the woman who lived next door stepped into our house like she'd been waiting for that moment her whole life. She touched my mother's things. She whispered in my father's ear. She watched me the way a snake watches a mouse, still, patient, certain. And the worst part? Everyone kept telling me she was helping. They didn't see what I saw. Not yet. But that afternoon, when I walked into the kitchen, everything changed. I stood in the doorway of the kitchen, my feet numb against the tile. The light from the window hit the sink just right, making the water stains glisten like tiny fingerprints left behind by time. Her mug was still there, the one with the small pink roses around the rim, chipped at the handle. She always said it felt better to drink from something imperfect. I didn't touch it. I didn't dare. The house should have been louder. Grief, I thought, would echo like slammed doors, wails from some bottomless place. But it didn't. It just rewrote the air, made everything wrong in a quiet, suffocating way. Even the walls seemed to lean in, listening for the voice that used to hum while pouring tea or correcting my dad's tie before work. Nothing hummed now. Not even me. I wandered toward the chair she used to sit in, the one beside the bookshelf she refused to replace because it held stories better than the new ones. I didn't sit, just pressed my palm to the worn armrest and waited for something, anything. But all I got was the low creak of wood under my fingers, like a whisper I couldn't understand. 3 days. That's all it had been since she died. 3 days since the ambulance pulled away too quietly. Since they told me it was her heart, and that sometimes things like this just happen. I remember wondering how anything that final could be called just. The thing I keep playing over again and again is that last thing she said to me. We were in the kitchen. She was stirring soup, and I was whining about college applications or maybe my hair, something stupid. She looked up, her eyes more serious than I'd ever seen them. You have to promise me, truth above all, she said, even when it costs. Back then, I thought she was talking about life advice. Now, I'm not sure. Maybe she knew something. Maybe that wasn't just a mother trying to sound wise before bedtime. Maybe that was a warning. The front door creaked. I turned too fast, my spine locking. Valora's voice floated in before I saw her. I brought soup, she said. Your father's barely eaten. She entered like she belonged, coat open, curls still perfect from the morning. She carried a white ceramic bowl, covered with a cloth I recognized from our linen drawer. The smell filled the room fast. Chicken. Rosemary. Something else I couldn't name. You didn't have to, I started. She cut me off gently. Grace would have wanted us strong. Us. She moved toward me like a breeze that didn't ask permission. Hugged me with arms that stayed too long. Wiped my cheek without asking if I wanted her to. Her perfume was floral. Not Mom's cinnamon oil. Something heavier, cheaper. I know this is hard, she whispered, but we'll get through this together. I didn't answer. I pulled away. She smiled like I'd done something adorable. I set the table, she added, heading toward the dining room. Just the 3 of us tonight. 3. By the time I made it to the stairs, I could feel the sweat in the back of my neck. I didn't want to cry. Not in front of her. Not when she was already replacing the quiet with herself. Later that night, I came downstairs for a glass of water. The hallway was dark, but the living room lamp glowed dimly. I froze when I saw her. Valora, sitting in Mom's chair. Her legs tucked under her, a book in her lap. The pale blue cardigan, my mother's, wrapped around her like it had never belonged to anyone else. And on her face, that same calm smile people wear in hospitals and church pews. It still smells like her, doesn't it? She said, not even startled. Comforting. I felt my hand close around the stairs banister. tight enough that I felt the ridges cut into my palm. I didn't say a word, just turned away, swallowed the bile crawling up my throat. That sweater hadn't been in the laundry basket. She'd taken it straight from my mother's closet.
She didn't ask.
She just did. I went back upstairs and sat in the dark. No lamp, no music, just me and the whisper of what used to be mine. I didn't hear my father say goodnight. I didn't hear him thank her for the soup or for staying late. But I did hear one thing. He was on the phone. His voice carried just enough for the words to sink. Thank God for Valora. I don't know what I'd do without her. That line, it cracked something inside me. Not loud. Just a thin break, like hairline glass before its spiderwebs. She's not saving us. She's replacing her. I didn't sleep after hearing my father say those words. They kept circling my head long after the house went still, long after the lights went out. I lay awake counting the soft thuds of the old air conditioning unit kicking on and off, as if the house itself was trying to breathe through the weight of everything we'd lost. I kept wondering how a family shifts so quickly, how gratitude can blind a person faster than grief. By the time morning crept in, I felt hollow, as if the night had scraped something essential from me. I pushed my door open slowly, stepping into the hallway to the faint patter of rain hitting the windows. The house smelled different again, heavier, sharper, nothing like the soft cinnamon warmth that used to drift from my mother's room. I followed the scent downstairs, each step sinking deeper into something I didn't yet know how to name. The kitchen lights were on. I paused at the threshold, holding the frame of the doorway the way a drowning person grips the edge of a boat. Valora stood at the stove, moving with a kind of confidence people have only in their own homes. Her sleeves were rolled up, and she was whisking eggs in my mother's skillet, the one Mom told me had been a wedding gift from her aunt, the one she refused to throw away even when the handle loosened. The smell hit me next. Garlic. Strong enough to make my eyes sting. My mother never used garlic in the morning. She always said breakfast should be gentle, not something that lingered on your breath all day. Yet here was Valora, humming a tune I didn't recognize, stirring and flipping like she had always belonged here. My father walked in behind me, rubbing his eyes. He smelled the air and smiled. Well, doesn't this look nice, he said, his voice warm in a way it hadn't been in days. Smells amazing. I stayed by the doorway.
I didn't sit.
I didn't even blink. Valora turned with that soft little smile she always seemed to wear whenever she knew someone was watching. I thought I'd make something hearty, she said. You need energy, sweetheart. You didn't ask, I replied, my voice far calmer than I felt. Her smile didn't crack. I only meant to make the morning easier. My father sighed. She's just trying to help, Romy. Be grateful. Be grateful. For what? For her stepping into a role that wasn't hers? For filling the silence my mother left behind before the silence even settled? Help is something you ask for, not something that enters with its own keys. I didn't say it out loud. I didn't trust my voice not to shake. Instead, I stared at the counter where Valora had placed a folded towel next to the bowl of eggs. It was one of Mom's, the little blue one with embroidered lemons on the corner. I wondered how long it had been since I'd seen it and why it made my stomach twist the way it did. For a second, I drifted. My mind pulled me backward. 2 weeks ago, the kitchen warm with the smell of vanilla batter. Mom stood barefoot by the stove, flipping smiley-face pancakes just for me, flicking flour onto my nose when I teased her about adding too many chocolate chips. Dad laughed, leaning against the counter, pretending not to steal the first pancake off the stack. It was a soft memory, bright enough to hurt. When I blinked back to the present, I saw Valora wiping the counter with the same towel my mother used that morning. The gesture should have been harmless. But it wasn't. It felt like someone scribbling over a photograph. I stepped back and turned toward the living room, needing space, needing breath. Before I reached the hallway, the doorbell rang. Valora moved faster than I expected, already halfway ahead of me, already smiling as she opened the door. "Morning," she said brightly. It was our neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, holding a basket of muffins. "I thought you might need something warm," she said. Valora touched her chest gently, as if overwhelmed. "You're such a blessing," she said. "I'm doing everything I can for them. Grace was like a sister to me. I just want to make sure her family's okay." Her family. I froze behind the wall separating the entryway from the living room, fingers curled around my coffee cup. Mrs. Patterson reached for Valora's forearm in that tender, sympathetic way people use on saints and heroes. "They're lucky to have you," she said.
Lucky.
My hand shook. I gripped the mug tighter so it wouldn't slip.
I didn't trust myself to speak.
If I did, something sharp would come out, and I wasn't ready to watch everyone rush to soothe Valora again, especially not Dad. I stepped back, letting the voices blur into the background. My throat felt tight, like something was rising in it, anger or grief or both. I couldn't tell.
Maybe they were the same thing now.
Maybe that was the part no one warned me about. As the rain eased outside, I walked past the living room on my way upstairs. Something caught my eye. The shelf near the piano looked off, crowded in a way it hadn't been before. I moved closer. My parents' anniversary picture, the one where Mom wore her ivory dress and Dad kissed her cheek, had been pushed behind another frame. A newer one I hadn't seen there yesterday. It was a photo of Valora and my dad at the community dinner last month. She was laughing in it, touching his arm. My mother wasn't in that picture. She hadn't gone that night because she wasn't feeling well. I swallowed hard. The world around me seemed to tilt just a little. "She's not helping," I whispered. "She's replacing." I stared at the photos for a long moment. Then I reached for the anniversary picture, slid it out, and tucked it behind my back. I didn't know why I hid it, only that something in me needed to. I didn't put the photo back on the shelf. I held it to my chest and climbed the stairs, quiet as breath, each creak in the wood threatening to give me away. Once in my room, I slid it under my mattress, careful not to bend the edges. I don't know why I hid it there, like it was contraband, but something in me knew, if I left it out, it would disappear too. The house was louder that afternoon, not with sound, but with activity. Cabinets opened and closed, drawers slid in and out. The sound of dishes being stacked, things being moved around. And then I heard it, a laugh that didn't belong here. It wasn't Mom's, it was too high, too polished. Valora. I walked downstairs slowly, letting the air adjust to my presence. The scent hit me first, something citrusy and sweet, nothing like the lavender Mom always used. I turned into the living room and stopped dead. The coffee table had been rearranged. The stack of Southern Living magazines my mom used to keep gone. In their place, a white ceramic bowl filled with bright lemons sat in the center, like a centerpiece in a model home. And Valora, she was there too. Not just standing. Sitting. Right in Mom's chair. She was curled into the cushion like she'd always belonged there. One leg tucked under, holding a mug of coffee that I recognized immediately. It was Mom's. The green one with the tiny crack along the rim. The one she refused to throw away. My breath caught. The chair was never empty. Not to me. It still had warmth. And now it had been claimed. Valora looked up and smiled like she'd just remembered a joke from earlier. She didn't stand. She didn't flinch. "Your dad said this was the best seat in the house," she said, lightly tapping the mug. "I can see why." I stared at her, trying to figure out how far I'd have to go to make her move. "It was my mother's chair," I said flatly. She lifted an eyebrow, still smiling. Then she had great taste. She didn't apologize. She didn't offer to get up. She didn't even blink. She was rehearsed. Looking back now, I should have seen it as a performance. Every smile, every sweetheart, every perfectly timed casserole dish choreographed. Precise. And I was the only one who wasn't in on the script. That's when I saw it. The candle on the end table had been replaced. The soft lavender pillar my mom always lit in the evenings?
Gone.
In its place, a slick little glass jar labeled Coastal Citrus. The kind they sold in bulk at big box stores. Impersonal. Manufactured. I couldn't stay in the room. I turned without a word and walked straight into the kitchen, trying to swallow whatever that emotion was. Anger? Grief? A cocktail of both. That's when I saw her again. Valora. This time with a pen in her hand, hunched over the notepad my mom used to keep on the fridge. She was scribbling something down, then tearing the page and placing it on the counter. "We'll need almond milk instead of dairy," she said to my dad as he walked in. "I've read it helps with fatigue." He nodded like she was a doctor. "Good idea. Romy, would you mind getting that tomorrow after school?" I froze. My mother's handwriting had always filled that notepad. Lists with loops in her G's, hearts above her eyes. She used to write, "Don't forget the cookies you like," in the margins. Now that page was gone, ripped out, torn like it never mattered. "I guess," I mumbled, eyes fixed on the clean tear where her handwriting should have been. Valora smiled as she handed the list to my father. "We'll get through this, one step at a time." That phrase, "we'll get through this." As if this were a project. As if my mother's death was an inconvenience, a pothole in the road she was already paving. I didn't know what I was more angry at, that Valora was scripting our grief, or that my father was buying it. That night, the house went quieter again. The kind of silence that wraps around you, makes your thoughts echo too loud. I crept into the hallway, needing space that didn't feel rewritten. As I passed the built-in shelf near the stairwell, I stopped. Something was off. My mother's portrait, the one where she was holding me as a toddler in the backyard, sunlight caught in her hair, was face down. Not removed. Not gone. Just turned away. Hidden in plain sight. My hand hovered above the frame. I didn't touch it right away. I just stared. Behind me, Valora's footsteps were soft on the hardwood. "Some frames are better angled against glare," she said lightly, her tone casual, like we were discussing window treatments. "Don't you think?" I didn't answer. Not out loud, but I flipped the frame back up. Slowly. Deliberately. Her presence lingered behind me for a second longer, like a storm cloud just waiting to roll in. Then she walked away. I didn't know what was waiting for me next. I didn't sleep after flipping my mother's photo upright again. I stood there in the dim hallway long after Valora walked away, staring at that picture as if my will alone could anchor it in place. The house felt warped, like familiar walls were bending around someone else's preferences. I went back to my room with a heaviness in my limbs, the kind that settles deep when you realize something is shifting under your feet, and no one else seems to notice. By evening the house had quieted, rain tapping lightly against the windows. I stayed upstairs for most of the day, avoiding the room she'd touched, avoiding the air she'd scented, trying to pretend that nothing else could be taken from me. But grief has a way of thinning your defenses, and hunger pushed me downstairs. I didn't expect to find her waiting. When I reached the kitchen, she was already standing by the stove. A bowl sat on the counter, steam rising in slow curls. She didn't even turn when she said, "I made something special for you. You need to keep your strength up." Her voice was soft, almost motherly, but not quite. Something in the tone felt rehearsed, like she'd practiced comforting phrases in a mirror. I walked closer, my steps cautious, and stared at the bowl she pushed toward me. The color was darker than anything Mom had ever made. The smell hit me next, rich herbs, heavy broth, and beneath it all, a sharpness that made my stomach tighten. I didn't sit. I stood there, staring at it while she watched me with that same calm expression she always wore. The one that suggested she knew better. The one that suggested she belonged here. "It's warm," she said, folding her hands on the table. "Just try it." There was something in her eyes, something too still. I picked up the spoon because refusing outright felt dangerous. I took a small sip. It coated my tongue in a way that felt wrong. Too rich.
Too thick.
Too something I could name. It wasn't just soup. It was a test. And I swallowed it. I set the spoon down, my throat tight. She didn't blink, didn't break eye contact. "Good," she whispered. "Your mother would have wanted you taken care of." The words slid under my skin like splinters. I didn't answer. I felt something shift in my stomach, first a flutter, then a twist, then a sudden wave of heat. I stood up too fast, the chair legs scraping the floor. "I need a minute," I muttered. I didn't make it to the bathroom before the nausea hit. I gripped the cold edge of the sink, trying to steady my breathing, but the room tilted. My hands were trembling. I barely reached the toilet before my body rejected everything violently. My throat burned, and I felt sweat gather on the back of my neck. A soft knock followed. Too soft. Too controlled. "It's all right," she said through the door. "Grief hits the body too. It can do strange things." It wasn't grief. It was garlic. Mom was allergic. The realization came in a flash, sudden, definite, cold. My mother never used garlic in her meals because even a little could make her sick. She always said it hid in everything unless you reminded people. Always remind them. I sat on the bathroom floor, shaking, staring at the tiles as if they could assemble themselves into answers. The taste in my mouth felt foreign. The memory of Mom sitting in a hospital room played in my mind, her hands wrapped around a plastic cup, her voice soft as she warned me, "Be careful, sweetheart. You have to pay attention. Garlic sneaks up on you." Looking back now, I should have realized what that moment meant. Something inside me started to connect pieces I didn't want to see. I washed my face and avoided the mirror. I didn't want to see how afraid I looked. I walked back to my room as quietly as I could, trying not to let the floor creak. I knew she was listening. I could feel it. Not the concern of someone checking in, but the watchfulness of someone measuring my reactions. When I closed my bedroom door, I leaned against it, breathing slowly. My hands were still unsteady. I needed something solid, something that belonged to me, something she hadn't touched. I reached under my bed for the small notebook I kept for school assignments. It was blank.
Clean.
Untouched. I opened to the first page and wrote in the corner, "Things that don't make sense." I listed them one by one. Garlic and soup. Wearing Mom's sweater. Photo turned down. Grocery list rewritten. My handwriting looked foreign.
Sharp. Tight.
Like the letters were clenched fists. I tore the page out, rewrote it on a fresh one, then tucked the notebook behind an old shoebox in my closet. I didn't know why documenting it mattered, but my instincts told me to start keeping record. Something was happening, and if I didn't write it down now, I feared I might start doubting myself. I didn't know what was coming, but I felt it gathering. Night settled around the house like a thick curtain. I tried reading, tried scrolling on my phone, tried anything that would quiet my thoughts, but everything felt too loud inside my chest. At some point, the floorboard outside my room creaked. One soft creak, then quiet. I froze. The door eased open. She didn't knock. She walked in like I was hers to check on. "I heard you weren't feeling well," she said, her voice dripping concern. I just want to make sure you're okay. She sat at the edge of my bed, as if it were natural. She reached out and brushed my hair behind my ear. The gesture was gentle, practiced, intimate in a way that made my skin tighten. You know, she whispered, your mother used to say you were too curious for your own good. I hope you won't make this harder than it already is. Every muscle in my body stiffened. Mom never said that. Not once. I forced a smile. A small, tight one. I'll be all right, I said, voice steady even though my heart was racing. She lingered, searching my face as if looking for a crack. When she didn't find one, she nodded and slipped out, closing the door without sound. The moment she left, I reached for my notebook and added one more line. She lied. Mom never said that. That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed awake listening to every creak in the hallway. The next morning, school let out early. Something about the power flickering in half the building and the main office staff scrambling to reschedule a parent conference. No one seemed upset to leave. Everyone was smiling, laughing, eager to get out of the damp hallways and into the sun. Except me. I walked home instead of texting Dad. I didn't want to wait on a ride. I didn't want to talk. By the time I reached the house, the street was quiet. Our mailbox leaned slightly forward like it was trying to whisper something. I stopped before opening the front door and listened. No music. No television. Just faint, soft clinking metal against ceramic, a spoon maybe. I stepped inside. I didn't call out. The house felt colder than usual. Not temperature, but mood. I moved slowly down the hallway, keeping to the edge of the floor where the boards didn't creak. The sound was clearer now. Gentle stirring, something simmering. And then I saw her. Valora stood in front of the stove, back slightly hunched, one hand steadying a pot, the other tipping a small brown bottle. My body froze. She poured something thick, amber, into the pot. Not much. A few drops. Enough. She didn't see me. She stirred the contents slowly, her movements methodical. She paused, glanced over her shoulder, then resumed as if satisfied no one was there. Then she started humming. A lullaby. Not one I knew. Something too old, too slow, almost off-key. I backed away. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. I pressed my spine against the hallway wall, trying to steady my breathing, praying the old baseboard wouldn't betray me with a crack. She didn't see me. I tiptoed back upstairs, one hand gripping the stair rail, so tight my knuckles ached. My legs felt disconnected from the rest of me, like I was floating and falling at the same time. I closed my bedroom door and locked it. This wasn't about awkward grief anymore. It wasn't about being replaced or ignored. This was something else. This was about control, about power, about poison. I grabbed the notebook from its hiding place and flipped to the first page. My handwriting looked rushed,
Jittery.
I scribbled under the last line. Brown bottle, poured into soup. Wednesday, 11:15 a.m. I stared at the words until the ink started to blur. I wasn't crying. My hands were shaking. This wasn't about memory. This was about murder. Looking back now, I think this was the moment I crossed a line. A line where I couldn't pretend anymore, couldn't hide behind what-ifs or maybes or the kind of grief that fogs your vision.
I saw it.
I knew. And knowing changes everything. An hour passed. Maybe more. I sat on the floor with my knees pulled up, staring at the closet door, trying to calculate risk, trying to breathe through panic. The walls seemed thinner now. The house smaller. She was just one floor away. A soft knock. My whole body went still. Then her voice, syrupy sweet. I made soup again. Your favorite. Want me to bring you a bowl? I stood slowly and opened the door just enough to see her standing there, tray in hand. No thanks, I said. I'm not hungry. She tilted her head, the smile never breaking. You sure? You barely eat lately. I tightened my grip on the door. Maybe I don't like being force-fed. Her smile faltered, just slightly, like a crack in porcelain. She blinked, nodded once, then walked away without another word. I didn't realize I was holding my breath until I heard her footsteps fade. That's when I made the decision. I waited until midnight. The house was dark except for the amber glow of the porch light leaking in through the blinds. I slipped out of bed and padded downstairs barefoot, each step deliberate. The kitchen was empty. Valora's purse hung by the back door, where she always left it. I unzipped it slowly, careful not to make a sound. There, at the bottom, nestled between her lipstick and a mini bottle of perfume, was the brown glass vial. The same one. Same worn label. The cap slightly loose. I didn't take it. I just pulled my phone from my pocket and snapped a picture. Front, back, label, seal. I turned the vial slightly and photographed the sediment clinging to the bottom. Then I zipped her purse and returned it exactly as it was. I returned upstairs and opened my notebook. A new page. Physical evidence captured. Next, find someone who will listen. I stared at the words until they burned into my mind. I didn't sleep. Again. But this time, I wasn't just scared. I had a plan. The next night settled over the house like a warning. I sat on my bed with the same notebook open in front of me, fingers trembling on the edge of the page. The photo of the brown bottle glowed on my phone screen beside me, its label crisp and undeniable. Digitalis. Use with prescription only. I reread that line again and again until the words felt carved into me. The Real bottle lay hidden beneath my mattress in a zippered pouch usually meant for winter scarves. I tucked it deep, beneath layers of things she would never think to touch. I kept imagining her finding it anyway, slipping into my room the way she had before, brushing my hair back like she owned the right. She thought I wouldn't notice, I whispered. She really thought I'd stay silent. The walls didn't answer. They just held my fear while the house settled into its nightly breaths. I knew I couldn't hold this alone anymore. Not without breaking. Not without disappearing inside someone else's version of my life. My fingers found my phone, cold and familiar. There was only one person left who might hear me without turning what I said into a lecture or a dismissal. Only one who still believed my mother's instincts meant something. I dialed. The clock on my nightstand read 11:14 p.m. The ring tone stretched long enough for regret to seep in. Then she answered. Romy? Honey, is everything okay? Her voice pulled something loose inside my chest, something I'd been gripping too tightly. All at once, the dam broke. Words tumbled out, shaking and uneven. I think she killed Mom. Silence. Heavy. Sharp. The kind that doesn't judge, it absorbs. Then, tell me everything. So I did. I told her about the soup, the smell, the garlic, the way my stomach dropped before I even tasted it. I told her about Mom's allergy, how she'd warned me you always had to remind people, how she never slipped about something that serious. I told her about the chair, the sweater, the framed photo turned down. I told her about the grocery list torn from the pad and replaced with Valora's handwriting. And then I told her about the brown bottle. Through it all, she didn't interrupt. Not once. When I finished, the line stayed quiet long enough for me to hear my breath through the receiver. Then Isolde spoke, voice low, steady. Grace had heart trouble, but it was under control. They said stress, but I never believed it. I closed my eyes, letting the words sink in. Her tone sharpened. You still have the bottle? Yes. Do not tell anyone else, she said. Especially not your dad. Not yet. I felt my heart clench at the reminder. He wouldn't believe me. Not with the way he looked at Valora now, as if she were the only stable thing left in the house. Listen carefully, she continued. I'm going to get copies of Grace's medical records. I'll ask someone I trust to review them. A friend from my teaching days, his sister works in toxicology. She might be able to help. I swallowed. What do I do? Nothing, she said. Not yet. Don't confront Valora. Don't change your routine. Let her think you're still grieving.
Can you do that?
I breathed out slowly, gripping the notebook like a lifeline.
Yes.
I won't let her know I know. Looking back now, that moment shifted something permanent. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was planning. I was gathering. We said goodnight, though the word felt strange in my mouth. There wasn't anything good about the night, not with what I knew now, not with what I couldn't unknow. I hung up and walked to my desk. My hands were calmer than they had been all day. I printed the photo of the brown bottle and taped it inside the notebook. Clean, clear, undeniable. Under it, in small letters, I wrote, I am not imagining this. She will not get away with it. As I put the pen down, the floorboard outside my door creaked. A soft, delicate sound, too deliberate to be the house shifting, too close to ignore. Her voice, barely a whisper, slid through the crack of the door. Good night, sweetheart. My blood went cold. She had knocked. That was the moment I realized she was listening, watching, measuring. That was when I knew she didn't knock. I kept my door locked the next morning, not because I thought it would stop her, but because it gave me a few more seconds if I needed them. I moved slower, chose every word carefully. I was no longer just watching her. I was planning around her. The house was quiet when I came home from school.
Too quiet.
The kind of quiet where something always waited behind it. I opened the front door and immediately heard voices, familiar ones. Not hers. Not my father's. Laughter. Clinking teacups. Paper rustling. I turned the corner into the living room and stopped. The table was covered in a velvet tablecloth I didn't recognize. Deep plum, like something chosen for a bridal shower or church fundraiser. On it were scattered programs, typed and printed, with Grace's name in bold serif font. A celebration of life, Grace Marie Thompson. Her photo sat in the middle, framed by candles I knew weren't ours. Valora stood at the center of it all, holding a stack of papers like she'd been running rehearsals for weeks. Around her were 4 neighbors, 3 women, 1 man from across the street, nodding as if this was exactly how it was supposed to be. Like this made sense. We've chosen the readings, she said. And I'll open the ceremony, of course. Grace would have wanted that. Her voice was gentle.
Warm. Polished. No one looked up at me.
Not right away. Then Mrs. Collier turned, the woman who used to help us with casseroles every Thanksgiving. She smiled and said, You must be so proud of her, Romy. She's taken care of everything. She even wrote a little tribute for you to read, such a thoughtful gesture. I felt my mouth go dry. I didn't ask her to. The air shifted. Not with tension. With pity. Valora stepped forward, placing a hand lightly on my shoulder. Grief makes us all a little confused. Romy's been through so much. We all have. But I know her heart, and she'll do beautifully on Sunday. There it was, that tone again. The one that lured sympathy like flies to honey. The one that made everyone nod and smile and dismiss the small girl who couldn't keep her voice from shaking. Laughter followed. Gentle, like someone had cracked a joke. Someone handed me a program. I didn't take it. I stood there, frozen. She was no longer just helping. She was leading. Looking back now, I didn't see it clearly until that exact moment, how power changes hands not by force, but by default. When no one steps in to stop it, it just happens. I turned away, walked toward the hallway, past the bookshelf, past the memory table. Something caught my eye, an empty space where Mom's journal used to sit. The brown leather-bound one with a tie strap.
Gone. I didn't ask.
I didn't need to. I went to my room, shut the door, and sat on the edge of my bed.
My hands didn't shake this time.
I pulled out a fresh sheet of paper and started writing my own tribute. No metaphors. No curated verses. Just raw memory. The way Mom used to hum while folding towels. The way she'd tap my chin with her pinky when I was being stubborn. The way she whispered, truth above all, even when it costs, as if she knew I'd need those words someday. I folded the page and tucked it into her poetry book, the one with creases on the corner from her favorite stanza. Then I picked up my phone and texted Anna Isolde. She's planning the memorial like it's her wedding. Isolde's reply came within seconds. She doesn't get the last word. You do. The ache in my chest eased just a little. Hours later, after Valora and the neighbors had left, I went to print out the document for my speech. The printer was humming, still warm from use. I opened the tray to load my draft and saw something already sitting there. I pulled it out. A single form. Application to volunteer as next of kin representative. Name: Valora Ashcroft. Relationship to the deceased. Chosen sister. My fingers trembled as I read it again. I checked the timestamp. Printed 2 hours ago. Chosen sister. Not friend. Not neighbor. She wasn't just wearing her clothes. She was wearing her name. I didn't rip the paper. I photocopied it instead. I stood in the hallway with the photocopy still warm in my hand, its ink sinking into the fibers of the paper like a bruise settling beneath skin. I tucked it into my notebook and pressed the cover shut, letting the weight of it steady me. Something inside had shifted again, not the frantic fear from before, but something colder, clearer. I wasn't just gathering scraps anymore. I was preparing. Saturday crept in with a gray haze clinging to the windows. The house felt heavier than usual, as if even the air was bracing for whatever tomorrow would bring. I walked through the hallway toward my mother's old room, searching for her poetry journal. I wanted to reread a passage she'd once written about courage, something I used to tease her for calling old-fashioned wisdom. But the leather-bound journal was missing. I scanned the bookshelf twice, then 3 times, pulling out volumes one by one. Her gardening guides, her dog-eared recipe books, the short story collections she kept from college. But the journal, the one she wrote in every night the month before she passed, was gone. A faint voice drifted from the living room. You never lose someone if you carry their strength. My pulse kicked. That line wasn't a common quote. It wasn't in any book she owned. It was in my mother's journal. I moved toward the living room doorway, my feet silently closing the distance. Valora sat on the couch, legs crossed neatly, glasses perched on her nose like she was the one who used to edit manuscripts at night. The journal rested open in her lap, filled with colored sticky tabs marking specific sections. She flipped through the pages slowly, her lips moving as she rehearsed. Your mother had such a poetic soul, she said when she finally noticed me standing there. These will make the memorial unforgettable. I stepped further into the room. They weren't meant for you. She blinked, tilting her head with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. But they help everyone, don't they?
No.
They didn't help everyone. They helped me. Looking back now, this was the moment I felt something sharp and final settle inside my chest. A line drawn, a boundary fortified, because she wasn't just borrowing my mother's words. She was claiming them, treating them like props for a performance she had spent weeks crafting. My hands curled into fists at my sides. "Give it back," I said quietly. She laughed, soft, condescending. "Sweetheart, this is for the service. You'll thank me tomorrow." I didn't answer. I didn't trust myself to. I left the room before she could say anything else, the walls tightening around me as I walked. I went straight to my mother's closet, inhaling the faint scent of her perfume still clinging to the fabric of her dresses. I needed something of hers, anything untouched. My eyes landed on the empty hanger where the blue dress used to hang. The dress she told me I'd grow into someday. The one she wore for family photographs, anniversaries, the rare evening out.
Gone.
A chill moved through me. I turned toward the guest room, a part of me already knowing the answer. There it was, on the chair by the window. The blue dress, ironed smooth, laid out carefully as if waiting for someone to step into it. Next to it were a pair of heels in velour size and a stack of note cards. I stepped closer. On the top card was a line from my mother's journal. My eyes stung. "She plans to wear her words. And her skin," I whispered. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't crumble the way I might have a week ago. Instead, I felt something settle low and steady. Not rage, resolve. I walked back to my room and pulled out the volunteer form I'd photocopied. I made 2 more copies. One for Aunt Isolde, one for tomorrow, and one for whoever else would need to see it. My phone buzzed on the bed. A text from Isolde. "How are you holding up?" I typed back. "I want to speak tomorrow." Before her. She responded almost instantly. "Then you will. And she will listen." For the first time in days, my breathing eased. Night wrapped around the house slowly, lantern-like shadows stretching across the carpet. Valora moved through the hallway humming the same lullaby she'd used while poisoning the soup. I waited until her footsteps faded before closing my notebook and packing everything I'd need for the next day. I wasn't going into that church as a grieving girl anymore. I was going as my mother's daughter. And tomorrow, I would be the one who told the truth. Sunday morning arrived dressed in quiet tension. Not the kind of silence that soothes, but the kind that swells just behind your ribs, warning you that something is about to break. I sat in the back seat of Aunt Isolde's car, staring out the window as the Charleston streets blurred past. The church steeple came into view, like a blade against the sky. I held my notebook in my lap, my palms damp against its cover. Tucked inside were the speech I wrote, the photocopies of the form, and the printout of the bottle's label. I'd gone over my words all night, not to memorize them, but to feel them in my chest, to let them fuse with my breath, so I wouldn't tremble when it mattered. Inside the church, white flowers lined the aisle. Grace's photo, my mother's photo, stood at the front in a silver frame Valora had picked. It was the same one she used in the brochures. My mother looked peaceful in it, but also hollow.
Cropped.
Like whoever chose that shot didn't know the way her eyes lit up when she laughed, or how she squinted just before saying something clever. Valora stood near the podium, dressed in Mom's blue dress. Hair curled like hers. Her lips painted soft pink, her hands wrapped neatly around a folder. "She's so devoted," someone whispered behind me.
Devoted? No.
This was theater. This was theft in slow motion. I sat in the second row. Dad beside me, shoulders hunched, eyes red. He hadn't said much all morning, just offered me a weak smile as we entered and reached for my hand. I let him, but my fingers didn't squeeze back. Valora stepped up to the microphone. The crowd stilled. "Grace Thompson was my sister in every way but blood," she began. Her voice cracked perfectly. She was light and laughter.
And strength.
And now she is memory. The audience nodded. A woman dabbed at her eyes. Valora continued. In her final weeks, Grace confided so much to me. Her fears, her regrets, but mostly her hopes for her family. For Romy, I felt my heart jolt. She opened the journal. My mother's journal. Pages tabbed and dog-eared. She wrote, Valora read aloud, "You never lose someone if you carry their strength." That line, that was written for me. Something in me stood up before my body did. My knees moved on instinct. I rose from my seat. That entry wasn't written for her. The room gasped. All heads turned. Dad stiffened beside me. Valora faltered mid-page. Romy. I stepped into the aisle, pulling out the folded sheet from my notebook. That quote, she wrote that in a private journal, not a speech. And not for you. The hush grew heavier, like the whole building held its breath. I walked slowly to the front, paper in one hand, photo in the other. I turned to face the room. My mother was many things. She was fierce. She was funny. She made you tea before you knew you needed it. She taught me to say what's true, even when it hurts. I paused. My voice didn't shake. And I've been quiet because grief is heavy. But silence isn't kindness. Not when it lets lies live longer than truth. I held up the printout of the brown bottle. The woman who just read to you is not family. She didn't walk my mother through her final moments. She didn't hold her hand or wipe her brow. What she did was position herself. She inserted herself. She rehearsed. I unfolded the photocopied form. 2 days ago, she submitted this. Application to serve as next of kin. Listed herself as chosen sister. Gasps again. A man in the front row whispered, "That's not legal." A neighbor in the pew behind him stood up slowly. Valora told me Grace had been sick for months, but I saw Grace jogging 2 weeks before she died. Another woman spoke next. She asked me to help draft a eulogy before Grace even passed. Said she was just preparing just in case. Valora stepped back, her face pale now. The poise cracked at the edges. I was just helping, she said. You were rehearsing, I answered. She didn't reply. The pastor approached gently and placed a hand on Valora's arm. Maybe you should sit down now. Valora looked at my father for support, but he didn't meet her eyes. Aunt Isolde moved beside me, her hand resting firm on my shoulder. The heat of it steadied me. Around us, people weren't whispering anymore. They were watching and believing. For once, they saw what I saw, and what they saw was enough. That afternoon, after the church emptied, I walked to the cemetery alone. The sky hung low with spring clouds, and the grass was damp beneath my shoes. I knelt beside my mother's headstone and pulled the Ziploc from my coat pocket. The brown bottle, still sealed, still stained at the base. I placed it beneath the stone, covered it with a flat rock. Not for justice, but for closure. She tried to erase her. Then she tried to erase me. But neither of us were ever gone. We were just waiting to be heard. Before I go, let me say this. Not everyone who brings you flowers comes in peace. Sometimes, they come dressed in your mother's favorite dress, holding a speech she didn't write, telling a story she never lived. Sometimes, the villain wears a smile and hands you soup. And sometimes the quiet girl in the second row is the only one brave enough to tell the truth. So if you've ever had someone steal your place, your voice, or the memory of someone you loved, this story was for you. If it stayed with you, share it. If it shook you, comment below. And if you want more stories that fight for truth, subscribe now because the next one might just be yours.